Hello and welcome to Face to Face on City TV. My name is Umaru Sanda Amado. It's another exciting episode. Our focus today is on something that matters in your survival: the acquisition, ownership, and registration of land. When I come back, I tell you who my guest is. My guest on Face to Face is Executive Secretary of the Lands Commission, Suleman Daud Mahama. It is on his laps that every land document you have should actually be lying. Sir, you're welcome to Face to Face.
Thank you very much.
Is that proper to say that everybody who has an indenture or a site plan, you are their boss? Anyone who owns land in Ghana, you are the boss?
Well, I wouldn't say that is. We are just administrators, and we support just the registration of instruments on land and titling in the Greater Accra region and parts of Kumasi. I supervise over all the activities relating to administration of lands in the country.
Okay, so nationally.
Yes,
but you
nationally.
mentioned Accra and Kumasi. I wasn't sure what you meant by that.
I'm saying we do land titling in Accra and Kumasi.
Okay.
And for the rest of the country, it's a deed registration system.
I'll ask you to explain that later.
Yes,
but what is the Lands Commission?
Well, the Lands Commission has been established by Article 258 of the 1992 Constitution to be the institution responsible for the management of public lands, for us to provide advisory services to government, traditional authorities, and set policy on land for the country. In addition, we also register interest in land, and we also carry out surveys of land. That is all the geometric surveys that are supposed to be taking place in the country. We supervise that, and we also regulate how surveying is done in the country. We also provide advice on land values. So in terms of valuation of properties, for compensation, for stamp duty, for any other purposes, we provide advisory services on that. In addition, we support customary authorities in how to manage their lands. You know, the Constitution makes the ownership of land to vest in the appropriate customary authorities, be they stools, be they families, be they clans. So here we provide them with support, advising them on how best to manage these lands. We had started some initiative to try to establish customary secretariats and provide them with technical guidance. So we are in the process of doing that, and we continue to roll that one out from time to time.
What's your relationship, or what's the difference between the work you do from what the Ministry for Lands and Natural Resources does?
The Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources is the overarching ministry which under which the Lands Commission forms a part. The Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources takes care of all the land and natural resources of the country. So it has three main arms, that is mining, forestry, and then the land. So Lands Commission dealing directly with land answers to the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources.
So you don't do policy. Are you a regulator? What exactly are you?
Our work can be seen in three phases. First of all, we are policy advisors. We are also regulators, and at the same time, we provide advisory services.
Because you mentioned the survey part,
yes.
You regulate the surveyors in Ghana, is that what you're saying?
Yes, we issue licenses for all cadastral surveyors in this country, and we also control how the quality of work that they do.
So are surveyors supposed to be state-owned, or even if you're a private surveyor, you have to come through the Lands Commission to be surveyed?
Yes, because the mandate for the regulation of survey is in the bosom of the Lands Commission, we license them to practice in accordance with the regulations as spelled out by the Survey Act. Now, we are hoping that when the land bill finally is assented to by the President, that function still becomes ours, because it will be within the confines of the Lands Act.
What is your difference or relationship with the Architectural and Engineering Services Limited, AESL? Do you have any relationship?
Well, the relationship is one of coordination. Really, they are a consultancy service who provide consultancy services relating to the built environment, and also undertake some of the services over which we superintend, like the AESL undertakes valuations, they undertake quantity surveying, they undertake architectural work. We relate to them as far as the issues relating to land administration, valuation, and land survey.
Because you mentioned valuation as one of your mandates as a commission,
Yes.
so if government wanted to value some state property which is under litigation in court, is it AESL that does that or Land Commission?
The mandate actually falls within the Lands Commission.
Okay.
It is the Land Valuation Division of the Lands Commission, which is the advisor to government as far as property valuation is concerned.
I see.
AESL is a company, it's a government company, which also undertakes it. But in case of variations in opinion, the Lands Commission, the Land Valuation Divisions
Does it now?
Yes.
So who owns land in Ghana? Because there's this thing about land is vested in the chief, some other, the president holds the land in trust. What's the difference in the ownership of the land in Ghana? Does it differ from geography to geographical location, or we treat all lands in Ghana as one?
Well, lands in Ghana have different forms of ownership. We can look at land as first owned by customary authorities. Now, the customary authorities have the highest form of ownership of land, which we call the allodial title. It is like the freehold. This can be vested in a stool. It can be vested in a clan. It can be vested in a clan. In fact, in some instances, it can be vested in an individual who may have purchased it long ago.
So in a chief, do we have one vested in a chief? Or it has
Yes.
to be, okay, so a clan, a chief, or a family?
You know, when it's vested in the land, I mean, we say it's vested in the stool, the manager of that stool is the chief.
Okay.
So, or if it is vested in a clan or a family, the head of the clan with his advisors are the managers of that land.
Okay.
So the ownership itself is vested in the community that owns it.
Okay.
But apart from the customary authorities, we also have government. Government uses its power of eminent domain, that is the power of compulsory acquisition, to acquire land and vest it in itself. So we can vest lands, and that is how government has acquired a lot of lands. During the colonial era, we used the Public Lands Ordinance to do a lot of the acquisitions that currently we possess. And when the State Lands Act was passed in 1962, we have used it subsequently to acquire lots of lands within the country for different purposes that government needs. Now, the third strand that you may find is that there may be individuals who, with their wealth, are able to purchase land, who purchased land freehold some time ago, and this land vests in them. And they own it, they own the freehold interest in such lands. So if you are looking at the categories of ownership of land, we have the state lands, we have the customary lands, and then we have the private lands.
So the customary lands are more than the state lands?
Yes. The government only acquires land when it critically needs it.
Okay.
So most of the land, and you can see that the Constitution vests all lands that are owned by the customary authorities in themselves.
Okay. So they own their land, and if they are not willing to do anything with it, they keep it there. But if the state needs it, can the state take your land by force?
No, it is not by force, but we have it's a law which we call the power of eminent domain. As a state, the state actually seeks the interest of all. So if we need land, say for a construction of, say, a road, I mean, the government is given that power by the State Lands Act to go in and then use certain procedures to acquire.
Okay.
But the Constitution also makes it mandatory that when you acquire, you pay compensation promptly, adequately, and fairly. So those restrictions, there are restrictions on government. So you cannot just go acquire land just like that. But you acquire and it is subject to that. The challenge we have with it is sometimes identifying who owns the land to pay the compensation. So if, for example, you acquire a piece of land and there are 100 claimants, then they will have to go to court to ascertain who really is the owner before the compensation can be paid. So that can delay payment of compensation.
So is the ownership of land in Accra different from how it happens in Kumasi and how it pertains in the northern part of the country? And I'm referring to the customary part.
Yes. Yes, there are differences. For the greater part of Greater Accra, stools generally do not own lands. It is the clans and the families which own lands. The history is the way they settled. And it is mainly, so there's strength in the ownership of the lands vests in the clans. When you move out of Accra, you go to places like the Upper East, Upper West. Similarly, it's the same thing. It is the families and the clans who own the land. Chiefs as such, or stools or skins as such, do not own lands in those areas. Parts of Volta region, you find that parts of Central region and Western region, you may see even Eastern region, there are parts, especially within the Equiapim area, most of the lands are held in either families or in clans. But other parts of the country, it is the skins and the stools who own it. So majority of lands in Ashanti, it is difficult for you to say it's a family land or a clan land. Mostly it's stool land. Most of the Western region, most of Central region, Bronga, Hafu, and the rest, you have the stools having the whole of the northern region. It is difficult for you to identify any specific family or clan that may own land.
Okay, one land, okay. So if these people have been managing their lands on their own, so the customary people have a way, government has its own way, and private individuals have their land, what was the use of the Lands Commission, and what would you say you've significantly done over the past decades? Well,
the Lands Commission as an administrative body provides guidance in how land is administered. What is important for us to recognize is that land is the fulcrum within which all development takes place. Land facilitates credit. Land facilitates revenues to the state. Land facilitates security. Land facilitates mortgages. So you see that there is nothing in the, that you can do as far as development is concerned that you cannot talk about land. So the efficiency with which you manage the lands is important. So it means that if the land management is efficient, then it will mean that a lot of the lands that you need for programs, for projects, for any development activity at all can easily be accessible in the right quantities, in the at the right time that it is needed.
So how have you done this over the years?
Well, the Lands Commission has existed in various forms since 1928. So this role that we play mainly was focused essentially on mainly on state lands. So we're administering state lands and the rest. But you will see that when the Administration of Lands Act was passed in 1962, it gave government the authority to concur in, that is, give approval to any grants that are made as far as stool lands are concerned. During those times, there was very little distinction between family land, clan land, or stool land. So they were treated all as customary land for a very long time. The 1992 Constitution has made very significant differences, and that has also created some of the issues that we grapple with. So with the power of concurrence, we ensure that land that is being developed must, first of all, be done within a planned environment. So we collaborate with the Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority, which used to be the Town and Country Planning, to make sure that before we grant concurrence to stool or clan land transactions, it conforms with planning schemes for the area. If government is going to do anything, once the Town and Country Planning, previous Town and Country Planning, or currently the Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority has not authorized it, has not brought it in the form of a planning scheme or what we now call a local plan, you cannot
It's good you've introduced them. So Land Use and Special Planning Authority.
Yes.
What is their work?
Their responsibility basically is to organize land use planning
everywhere in the
country. The whole country now is a special planning area.
So they're supposed to plan and say this where a road is supposed to be, a school and all of that.
Yes.
And do they really have the whole country mapped out, or they do it in bits and pieces? Do you know?
I think we should look at it. There are 3 strands of planning that has been introduced. That is, we have a national special development framework, which just gives the broad land uses within the country. Then we have the individual regional special development framework. And then when it comes to the district level, then you have what we call a local plan. The challenge we have had is that the Land Use and Special Planning Authority, just like the Lands Commission, has been for a very long time under-resourced. So badly under-resourced that it is very difficult for them to provide the type of services that we want. Now, they have also moved a lot. They have moved from the Ministry of Local Government, Ministry of, I don't know which ministry.
They haven't fallen. It would have been Works and Housing.
Works House. They have gone to Lands and Natural Resources. So over the years, they've been shifted from place to place until they were working with the Ministry of Local Government. And unfortunately, during the 80s and the 90s, they have now been moved into the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation. Now, when you look at it, this sort of structure creates its own problems. Because at the national level, they are with the Ministry of they are the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology.
But
so they are budgeting and everything is supposed to come from there. But at the local level, they are supposed to be under the Ministry of Local Government through the district assembly. So it means that sometimes resource challenges.
There's a break in the chain.
So resource allocations become an issue for them.
So are you saying that if someone wants to buy a land, whether for an industrial use or for building their home, when they bring the indenture, which is what the chiefs would issue you or the landowner would issue you, when they bring it to you, Land Commission, for you to approve, you have to check with the LUSPA and say that, check for me whether this guy's plan is in tandem to... You do that?
Yes, we do.
For every land?
For every piece of land.
So how can we have a mess in the country?
The challenge we have is rule enforcement in this country. There is so much indiscipline. I mean, development takes place so fast that it is very difficult for the institutional actors to cope with. So if the entire country is under-resourced, how do we expect them to produce the local plans at the speed at which development is taking place? And the Development Control Authority also rests with the district assemblies. So if they're building, for example, if you look at the Lands Commission, the provision in the Constitution in Article 267, for example, there shall be no disposition or development of any piece of land unless it conforms with a planning scheme of the area in which the land is located. Unfortunately, who enforces that? So you cannot get the enforcement from the district assemblies, and the planning authorities are within the local assemblies. So if they have no resources to do that, it becomes a big challenge to have it. So you see that there is this sort of dissonance between planning and development. So they may do the planning all right, but if owners of land just grant the lands anyhow without any thought of a scheme, then it creates a problem. We have also the challenge of quite a lot of the litigations on land, because most of the customary authorities do not really know the extent of their lands and their boundaries. And because they do not know the extent of their lands and their boundaries, it's very difficult for you to ascertain exactly who owns what. And when it comes to that, then you need to investigate this.
When will we get to the stage where we will not have a clutter, where we know that, oh, the plan is working?
It comes back to the under-resourcing of
and
the agencies.
Enforcement.
Yes, because, for example, land is a special commodity. You need to describe where it is. You can best describe where it is by means of a map. Since 1974, this country has not invested in doing any up-to-date maps for this country. We don't have
so
it.
mapping localities and having a national map.
It's not
we
there.
don't have a national map.
Well, we may have, but they are outdated, because if the last flying was done in 1974, these things, after 5 years, properly speaking, we should update them.
How does it work? An airplane flies and things?
Yes, an airplane flies, and then the maps are generated with ground truthing.
Can we use Google Cars, Google Maps?
Well, Google, I mean, don't forget there are security concerns with Google, so it doesn't really give you the exact accurate.
Exactly. Okay.
But in terms of accuracy, with which you need these maps, and the maps are not needed only by the Lands Commission, but generally almost all the special agencies. For example, you are laying pipelines, you need it. You are doing roads, you need it. Electricity, you need it.
Okay.
I mean, whatever, all the utilities, you need the maps.
I'll come back to you. This is Face to Face on City TV. My guest is Executive Secretary of the Lands Commission, Suleman Mahama. There's Dawood in there somewhere. It is their job to regulate the land space or the spatial aspect of the country. But there's a question though. If we have authorities that are in charge of this, how come you buy land from one chief and have to buy from another chief and then possibly buy from a third chief? What is the problem? When we come back, I'll put that question to him.
Action.
You're welcome back to Face on City TV. I am Umaru Sandamadu. My guest is Executive Secretary of the Lands Commission. Now, it is a normal thing for people to buy land from more than one person, multiple people. So they have so many indentures on the same portion of land or same parcel of land. It is normal now to have land guards on lands because ownership has become contentious. And we now have land courts because there are always litigations related to land in the courts. Who is to blame for this?
It's difficult to say. I think that when you are looking at it, you have to look at the society in which we are. Let us look at the strand of how the land ownership hierarchies work. At the top of it is the allodial ownership. Below it is what we call the usufructuary ownership. That is, if you are a citizen of any particular land holding group, you have absolute right to use any part of the land at all, to utilize any part of the land at all, be it build a house, farm on it, do whatever project you want on it, insofar as it does not conflict with that of another citizen of the place. Then you have those who come to buy lands in the form of tenancies. So they may have an arrangement, especially mostly in the rural communities where they do cash cropping. They may come and take land as tenants, in which the sharing of the proceeds is either two-thirds, one-third, and that sort of thing. Then below it is something which has been, abolished by the mortgages decree, but it still operates. That is pledges. People pledge their lands for various use, to people when they are in trouble, and people use the people who have the land has been pledged to will utilize the land for as long as the debt has not been paid. So it could even be generations. Now, when you look at land holding in Ghana, most of the time the whole of these hierarchies interplay at the same time. It is a great source of confusion. So people do not know exactly what is the type of right I have in this land. So when they are acquiring land, they do not know exactly which source to go to. It is important when you are buying land to know the person who is offering you the land, what right does he have? Is he a landlordial owner? Is he a usufructuary owner? Is he a tenant?
How do I know this?
Precisely. So this requires you to do some inquiries of your own and try to ascertain. Now, let's maybe discuss a little bit about the allodial ownership in the country. As I told you in the It could be vested in a stool. It could be vested in a clan or a family. The greatest confusion we have is in the Greater Accra region, and now going into parts of Central region because of Kaswa and the Senya Breku area, then a little bit into Eastern region in the mountains around the Burikitasi area. It is because of this confusion as to whether the land is stool land, it is family land, or it is clan land. Within even the clan, the differences between clan members as to who is the appropriate authority to grant land is a problem. Most of them also happen not to know what the boundaries are. So it becomes a little bit of a difficulty. It is not also helped sometimes the way it is some of the disputes that arise out of these lands are interpreted in court. And when they are interpreted in court and judgments are made, they have the force of law. The experience we have in the Lands Commission is sometimes some of these judicial decisions actually become also the source of new conflicts. So I will give you a few examples. If you take the last tool, for example, way back in the 1950s and the 60s, and even early part of the 1970s, most of the lands and the grants that they were making covered all their villages up to areas like Oyarefa and Madina, Oyarefa, Nkwantanan, Amrehia, all
that's
these.
the last two.
Yes, those are the last two used to make grants. There was a dispute between Mechanical Lloyd and one Mr. Tetenati. The Supreme Court ruled that the Frafraha chief who had made a grant to the Tetenati, Mr. Tetenati, actually was the proper person to grant because the last two had acquiesced in their ownership. Since that judgment, almost all the villages under law have sought a sort of independence. Now, it has been followed with other judgments like Ogbojo and La had this another dispute, and it was ruled in favor of Ogbojo. So the signal is that it is the clans in Accra that own the land and not
the biggest two.
Not the biggest two.
So there's a lot of factions in the bigger parcel.
Now, when you come to the families themselves, for example, if you take the question of, say, the Agbawe clan in La, it's differentiated into different sub-clans and families, like the Clanway. And then you go to places like Adenta, there is a different Clanway administering land. You go to Oyarefa, there is a different Clanway administering. And insofar as they do not know their boundaries, they will be selling one across the other. Now, when you look at the Conveyancing Act within which we work, you can only register interest in land if the person has a capacity to sell. So if I do not know who is the proper head of family of, say, the Clanway, how do I proceed? Now, for people who are involved in this, the different factions within the families, each of them go to pick a surveyor, most of the time quacks, who are not qualified to do that job, but they go ahead. And because we have this weakness in development control, they start the buildings even before the planning is done for the area. So we have this mess. So you have these multiple sales just because within the same clan, different factions within the same clan are selling the same piece of land.
But how do I know? Is there a place I can go? Can I come to the Land Commission and say, can you give me a surveyor? Let this surveyor go and pick this land and tell me who owns it? Is there something like that?
Yes, we do that to some extent, but it's limited. We are limited in the sense that until we are able to have the special maps where we will compel all this to show us their boundaries, so that where the areas of overlaps are, we are able to clear them, these problems will be with us. And it is extending beyond the areas I have described into the Shai area, into the Ningo areas. So virtually everybody there now, I always crack this joke that sometimes you just need to have a string of beads on your right hand, then you put yourself into the position of a knee, and then you start selling lands.
And writing indentures.
Yes, and because of the uncertainty with the number or the mutation of these clans into separate units, we have so many of them. So because of the uncertainty, a lot of them need self-help to be able to protect what they think is theirs. So to do that, then they go and bring in these land guards to protect their lands.
There's something you call search at the Lands Commission.
Yes.
How does that help?
Searches help because what it does is that it gives us a geography of the different type of transactions that have taken place in land. So
are these all recorded? Do all these transactions get recorded?
You see, for now, the way our recording has been is based on demand. But what we are aiming at doing is now to have a compulsory registration of all interest in land. But we have a long way to go.
So that if I have a parcel, instead of coming to National Commission, Lands Commission to say I want to register, you would have already registered. That's what you're saying?
Yes. So what we had, we got the land titling from the beginning. We had a misstep. The misstep being that when the land titling started, what should have been done at the time when it started in 1986 was that all the big landowners should have been registered first. But we did not. So what we did was to start with parcels. And once we start with parcels, now we have this big problem on our hands where we do not know the boundaries of most of the big landowners. So when it's that and there are cross sales and the rest, it is very difficult for you to determine.
I'm a young man in Accra. I work and earn salary. I've been paying rent. I'm tired of paying rent. I want to buy land and build. What would be your advice to me?
My advice is approach the Lands Commission.
Before
finding. At least we will give you a guidance. There are safe areas in Accra where you can do transactions. I can close my eyes and vouch for you that if you go to Bawi, that is if they still have land, I mean, if you go to Bawi, we are sure the sort of setup they have, traditional authorities, the sort of setup they have, you will have very little problems.
And do we know who owns the Bawi land?
Yes, it's the Bawi Kwate family, and they have a very well-defined structure of administration with their own land secretariat, which manages these things.
Why don't you publish things like this Bawi Kwate you've talked about so that we all know? Publish it in the newspaper so that if I want to buy land, I know that these are the safe places to go to. Why don't you have something like that, a notice board or billboard?
Well, I think this is a good suggestion that we may have to consider. But at least, you see, we are now trying to get out because, for example, Lands Commission, we've sat back and waited for people to bring their documents just for us to register. But we realize that we are not helping end the uncertainty that exists with land ownership. That is why we've been fighting for a very long time to have the maps of the country done.
Is there any such plan though?
Yes.
Is there a budget for it as yet?
Well, Lands Commission now has decided that to wait for government allocations, we may not be able to give it, given the other exigencies that government faces. We may not be able to get the amount of money that we need for the type of mapping we want to do. In fact, currently we are estimating it around $26–28 million. So Lands Commission really has initiated a process where we are having a discussions with the Minister of Finance to use the balance sheet of the Lands Commission to take a loan.
Okay.
To take a loan so that we can then have assistance to develop all this, get the maps. The coordinates that we use in surveying are very far between each other. So it makes the cost of survey very, very, very high.
If I don't come to Lands Commission, but I found an area and I'm told that, oh, this is the legitimate guy who owns a place, let him sell to you. How do I determine that the surveyor who did the work is credible and genuine?
The Lands Commission registers all land surveyors. Each surveyor has a diploma number, and we give them specific numbers and a certificate. So if the person does not have that, then he's not a qualified surveyor. He cannot practice.
Does he have to give it to me?
Yes.
Can I collect it from him?
Yes, you should be able to ascertain from him.
So it's like the way the lawyers have their...
Yes.
So then I bring it to Lands Commission and say,
yes, to ascertain
check for me if this guy is
yes,
genuine.
Yes. Or even if you just know his name and you bring it, we can check from our database.
Whether you have someone like that. So these people don't engage in criminal activities, selling land to people?
Definitely there are disciplinary measures. I mean, the penalties are too high for them to contemplate. There have been some we've had some aberrations. But of course, it's very small compared to the numbers of land surveyors we have.
So you can vouch for some areas in Accra.
Yes.
Does government own land in some parts of Accra where it gives to the citizenry who wants to buy?
Yes. Government normally, you see, with government land, always you ascertain the need for the citizenry. Then you can then decide, plan the area, and then do the locations. So if you look at Accra, the most desirable areas all tend to be government areas. Talk of Laboni, talk of Nyaneba Estate, talk of North Kaneshi Estate, talk of Airport Residential Area, Ridge. So all these are lands that government purchased from the customary authorities long ago and paid them compensation.
And sold to the owners now? So does government sell it to these people, or does?
Well, I mean, it's not sell. Government leases it out. On most of the time, it's not sale as a profit. Government uses it as a social intervention to encourage people to have houses.
Do we have such places still available?
Well, it's limited because we do not have large areas of land. In fact, the last ones we did was, I think, about 2 years ago in an area which had been acquired since 1947, which was meant for agriculture, but had been overtaken by urban development. So that area we call Pertains, which we dealt with about 2-3 years ago, and that is gone.
So that's encroachment. The encroachment of government lands also happens. How do you deal with such a situation?
It's a very difficult situation we have because the Lands Commission itself doesn't have the coercive powers to kick the people out.
You don't?
Well, what we can do is to maybe get the courts to stop you. But invariably, it's so broadly done that it is quite difficult for us. Our recourse is to depend on the assemblies for help and sometimes the police. But it is very difficult to get the assemblies because they themselves are also under-resourced. And sometimes you go to the police, they are also overstretched. So it becomes quite a bit difficult for us. Quite a lot of the encroached areas, I mean, it's so badly done in Accra that some of them we have decided that we should advise government, in fact we have advised government to let those lands go back.
So once land is encroached, it's difficult to take back, which makes it easy for people to encroach, encourages them. Because if, as you may say, encroach Pertains and nothing happened, I can also go and encroach Nwa.
Unfortunately, in Pertains, nobody...
I'm just using that as an example.
Yes, we don't have any... We've had encroachments. So, for example, if we look at some of the areas which have very serious national implications, if we take the Weja Road, for example, the area between the old Weja barrier up to where Giselle is, for example, the whole area was meant to be green. Green because the Weja water works is there. So when it overflows, that is where it's supposed to pass. That's the pathway. Unfortunately, people just encroach on it, and now it's a city. And every year you get a refrain when water goes there. Nobody there has any document covering the land. Similarly, we were looking at protecting some of the hills, the area we used to call GBC, at the top of
Ebri Road.
Not Ebri Road, on the Accra. So getting towards where we have the toll booth at Kaswa.
Okay.
The whole top of the hill was government farm, and it was Workers' Brigade who were operating over there. After the overthrow of Nkrumah in 1966, the place was given to GBC, and you have their antennas and the rest over there. Unfortunately, the whole area has been encroached and virtually made the land useless. So the challenge we have then is that they raise the vegetation cover, and you see that now when it rains, water, mud comes to take over the Accra-Kaswa road, and everybody yells at government that.
But it's like a mudslide.
Yes, so it is this sort of indiscipline that we are not able to control, and which leads to that, and it has quite serious implications.
This is face-to-face on CCTV. When we come back, I'm going to ask him, how easy is it to register? Because we are told you go through hell trying to register your land, which you have paid for. Plus, what does the digitization agenda really mean, and what fruits are we harvesting? You're welcome back to Face to Face. I'm having a conversation with the Executive Secretary of the Lands Commission. If I have my land, I bought it from a chief, it looks genuine, I have those 4 booklets. Why are they blue and green though? Is there a reason you do that?
Well, there's no reason. Yes.
And the next thing is for me to register, correct? There's something they call yellow card and all of what is that? Why does it go through? Why is it hellish trying to register your land in Accra?
Maybe what we should do is that we work within certain laws of the country. The basic law that governs land transactions is the Conveyancing Act of 1973, Act 2, I think NRCD 275 or so. Now, what it requires is that there's a checklist there. The land that you are coming to purchasing, who is your grantor? Is the grantor, does he have the capacity to grant you the land?
Grantor is the seller.
Yes, the seller. Does he have the capacity? So if we are not sure about that capacity, we have to investigate. He must have witnesses. Under customary law, elders of the community or elders of the clan or the family must certify, must acknowledge and concur in the transfer of the land to this third party. Have they appended their signature? Or if they are illiterate, have they put their thumbprints with their appropriate jurat? You have to check what is the consideration. Is there any value put for the grant of the land? Is it, if it's a leasehold, how much rent is he supposed to take, and that sort of thing? Have they signed? Is there an address for the grantor and then the person who is being granted the land? So you check all these details to be sure. The land must be described by way of a plan. There's a plan prepared by a qualified surveyor and signed and dated. And because of forgeries, we have now introduced what we call the barcoding. So we have to code it in such a way that once anybody forges it, subsequent transactions we can easily catch you on that. So all these are processes that we have to go through. Sadly to say, most of the grants that come, you do not know who is granting. So I could say I am Nisule and I have granted the land. So it comes here, and maybe you have to let officers check and see, is Nisule registered in the register of chiefs with the traditional authority? If it's not there, you cannot process. So
you need to do all this.
Yes,
but does that still mean it should take forever? And do you
well,
have to pay bribes?
We have issues. Don't forget that in processing these documents, all the environment in which we are is manual. So you need to always be checking and
manual verification.
Yes, you have to do this manual verification.
You had something you call single window at a point.
Well, that is the CSAU, which we started, which was send all the documentation to one point, and then the back office then handles it. But whilst the CSAU is computerized. The back office is not.
So you can get a nice receptionist with beautiful, they'll give you a slip, but then when it goes to the back,
but
it's
when
labor.
it comes to the back office, then you have to go through this tedious checks and that sort of thing.
But do I have to be there,
yes,
or the back office should deal with that on their own? Do I have to be physically present?
No, you don't need to be physically present.
Okay.
In fact, once you submit it to CSA, you should wait.
Okay.
But because the back office tends to be slow, there are these delays and we are not able to meet our timelines. In fact, so that is one of the areas that we are working on, and we are trying to go digital. So we've been trying. We thought that under the land administration project, we could have had enough funding to undertake all this. Unfortunately, the land administration project funds were dispersed over a very wide range of institutions. So what came to the Lands Commission itself, that did not do much. So we still are, despite several years of reform, not much has been achieved, and it goes against the grain of people's reasons. Why should we spend so much money and we get very little business? That is one of the things that has motivated us to think of our new digital reform.
How is that agenda going?
It's doing very well. What we are essentially going to do is we are focusing, first of all, the special data that we need to work with. We need to procure it. So we need to have the country flown at a large scale over the whole country, so that we have up-to-date modern maps of the country. That helps.
And you're looking at $28 million.
Yes.
You don't have that yet.
We don't
but
have
you can
it
get
yet.
it if you went for a loan using
Yes.
your...
Yes, which we think we can.
So you're working with the ministry.
Yes, we are. Yes. Then the second thing is that when you are surveying, you need control points to guide you on this. So if they are spaced over a wide range, wide distances, it becomes very difficult. For example, the control points in Accra, the last ones are somewhere around Achimota, around Neoplan. So assuming you are somewhere around, say, Domi, and you have to connect, you have to connect and come all the way back. So you can just imagine the difficulties. So what we are trying to do is that,
yes, so you want to close it up as much as you can.
Yes, we want to close that. And we have already identified about 52 points across the country, of which we want to densify.
Finally,
then it comes to actually to the digitization. First of all, we need to digitize all the manual records. When we digitize the manual records, then we have to develop a land information system which can speak to this. And it is within that we are now trying to use the little technology we have to start the process in Accra. We have identified 4 areas in Accra: District 03, District 04, District 19, and District 20. District 03 and 4 cover most of Accra. That is from about La Palm, stretching all the way to the Makola area, all the way towards Achimota, and coming eastwards all the way to East Legon and the rest. Then 19 looks at Tema and the Ningo, Pram, Afienya areas. So what we are doing now is that, in fact, as at now, if you want to do a search in those areas, you can easily go onto the website and get that information for those services. And we have different types of searches. The administrative searches, we have the ones which come from the police, we have the ones which which we call the official searches. And it comes from all over.
This land bill that is still waiting presidential assent, would it be the master solution to all our problems?
It is. You see, what we have done is that there were about more than 100 laws governing land. What we have done is that we have just consolidated this into one bill. What will be needed is that, yes, we have the law, but then its enforcement becomes the challenge. So we will want to see that we will have a very rigorous enforcement of the Land Act if the President gives us assent.
Thank you for speaking to us on Face to Face.
Thank you very much.
That's Suleman Daud Mahama, or you can call it Dauda too, or David. He is the Executive Secretary of the Lands Commission. My name is Umaru Sanda. I hope you've been enlightened enough. I have. Thank you. Stay with us. City TV, it's your world.